Wonderful. Great to see you. I'm so excited to meet you for the first time.
Yeah, likewise. I know. I think you were one of the first clinicians and practitioners that I crossed paths with. I believe it was on Threads first off,
Yeah,
right? And there was just immediate resonance. So super grateful that we got an opportunity to meet.
totally. Yeah, Threads has been interesting. I enjoy it over there. It's just a different vibe. And so it was really fun to see your work and thought, oh my goodness, we're doing some overlapping things and we kind of think in the same kind of way. So I'm excited to hear more. I love your writing. You're a beautiful writer. And I can't wait to hear some of your wisdom.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Just thanks for reading. Sometimes you never know if you're just screaming out into a void. So it's nice to know that it's landing on some eyeballs and some appreciative eyeballs as well.
Yeah, I really love what you have talked about with addiction. I'm so aligned with you on that, and you really articulated the like psycho-spiritual, like the psychic transmission that's even like intergenerational that gets passed down with addiction. And I just think so many people have no idea. So for the people who haven't read your article, what is your viewpoint on that? What's your knowing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent a lot of time in 12-step programs, found myself in treatment before I ever turned 21. And so I really grew up in 12-step. You know, I grew up in that program, became a man in that program. And I'm so grateful because I feel like I'm, standing on the shoulders of giants, right? And so my own curiosity and wanting to understand the foundation of what this malady is and the foundation of what recovery looks like. And so, tracing that back to really the origin story of AA and how, especially those first 3 steps came from Carl Jung. And Carl Jung was very clear in a letter to Bill Wilson, his understanding of the malady, right? In this sense that it is a psychospiritual disease. I don't really like that word disease. Dis-ease is better. Again, I like malady there. But that undoubtedly was my experience for sure. And, after, 10 years in recovery and working with so many different folks, it's become really, really clear that it tugs on something way deeper than just the surface level sort of behavior there. So, yeah.
Yeah, I could tell that you had written from a place of like lived experience and really understanding. And I had no idea about that part of your story. And so that's wonderful. I have addiction in my past too, and, recovered, and it was really trauma. And it was ancestral. Both of my grandparents, on one side did not heal, and the other side did. But it's even when it comes in like my inner vision shamanically, I can literally see that ancestor like suffering through me. And it was in healing the underlying like complex trauma that I don't even think about popping a benzo or drinking anymore. It doesn't even, if I've had a hard day, I'll go for like a workout or talk to a friend. It doesn't even cross my awareness to drink or to numb out, because I love being alive. And it really, when I work with people, it's really like the spiritual impulse wants to come through. It's like metaphorical. It's this like seeking of the divine in this. It's a messy process, but there's something else that's going on underneath the surface for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think of, just like the thirst for wholeness, right? Sitting underneath addiction. And what I found that was so interesting was all of these other 12-step programs that had nothing to do with substances, process addictions. I mean, everything, from nail biting to gambling, they all use this exact formula. So it speaks to something universal, right? And then it also, made me curious about, why nature and God and evolution would hardwire this thirst for wholeness within that, right? And so I think that, so much of our relationship to life in general, and especially within addiction and what I call the archetype of the alcoholic. There's really this sort of access of power, this relationship between our own agency and our own personal power versus surrender or transcendent power or willful communion with something bigger. And so we get kind of stuck within that axis. And so in drinking and using, it gives us sort of this false sense of power, this false sense of empowerment, this false sense of connection. And it works. It really works until it doesn't, right? As we know.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And the other thing is like, it's so accessible, like it's so normalized. It's so accessible. So many people, their happy hours, that's how they de-stress, because so many people are so disconnected from the body. And it's so normalized. And I think, that is like a recipe for people who are traumatized and don't know it, or neurodivergent and maybe do or don't know it. It's something that a dysfunctional culture just kind of promotes almost, from within. It's just like, hey, this is here. And that's the thing that I keep scratching my head at, is like, how is this normalized? How is this, how has this gotten to be this symptom, within society?
Yeah, I think you're dead on. I think it's way more cultural than people give it credit. And one of the threads that I was pulling on and what I wrote about is I took a look at the myth of Icarus sort of through this lens, but kind of flipped it on its head and wanted to spend more time focusing on the father of Icarus, Daedalus, right? Who's the inventor, sort of the technical tactician, and in many ways the father, the symbol of culture, right? And so I sort of have this belief and understanding that, Icarus's fall wasn't necessarily from hubris or excess. It was really a failure of initiation. He was given wings without the wisdom on how to fly, right? And so we see that everywhere, right? We have technology of gods. We have the access to just quick and easy transcendence, but no wisdom on the dangers of that, the perils of that, what that means, what that looks like, and how you can approach these places with wisdom and with containment and with eldership. So I think that's really the heart of it for me.
I love that. Part of my healing journey, I didn't heal complex trauma, unfortunately, with a lot of, traditional therapy, because when I healed, that wasn't available. People where I was, they weren't trained in trauma. And so I went seeking eldership, right? Because I had childhood trauma. It wasn't like I could go to my parents for that. And so when I was in college and I was in undergrad, I would seek out, I was like, I was kind of like obsessed with networking and networks, because I'm a rapid pattern synthesizer. Like, oh, your network. It's like, okay. And these people are wisdom holders. And, so I go into these office hours, with professors, and greatest part of my recovery was having a long-term mentor, a mentor that was, a trained counselor, a doctor, but this person took me under their wing for like 15 years and just guided me. And it wasn't therapy, but it was so therapeutic. And it filled in some of these gaps. And it wasn't just him, because I oriented to shamanic elders and female elders. I always look for where are the gaps in the eldership, and then in my own initiation into, kind of resolving these steps, because all of my developmental processes were disrupted because I had to live in, chronic stress and an abusive environment. But I went and did like the soul recon, without of course knowing it, but sought that out. And that's so missing. And I love that you're talking about this. I'm so empowered to hear a working therapist talking about eldership. Like, that's amazing. You're not saying go to therapy. You're saying we've missed these rights to initiation, and it's harming us.
It is, and I've been spending a lot of time thinking about co-regulation and, the reality that our bodies don't end with our physical body, right? We have these biofields with these sort of octopus arms that sort of crawl out, and they're really looking for other secure nervous systems to not latch onto, but to connect with and to co-regulate. And there is a transmission that occurs without language. It's
Yeah.
it's mimetic in the truest sense of the word. And again, tracing the archetype of the alcoholic, you can really see the mimetic nature of both the shadow side of it and the recovery as well. And so it feels like a bit of a return to not necessarily traditional like discipleship, but real mentorship, right? And a part of that, I think, you know, we look at trades and stuff, and there's a lot of emphasis on, okay, here's how you do the job. Here are the techniques. Here's how it's done. Here's the strategy. But within that, and what we lost is, here's the ethics of this, right? Here's the meaning behind this. And that really can only be transmitted by somebody who has a deep and thorough embodiment of that. And it just exists in the space between two people, right? Which again is what 12-step programs just, you know, knocked out of the park.
Yeah. I love that. And that's, you know, healing is so relational, right? In that aspect of having this co-regulated other to meet you in that field. Now, I literally see, feel, and sense that biofield of someone, and I'm picking up on that information. Now, it's taken decades to really hone these skills, but to be able to see that in my inner vision, and to be able to, like, because it's so nuanced, to not become enmeshed, because sometimes people, they energetically, even somatically, cross another person's boundaries, you know, with that, because it's so, co-regulation is actually very sacred, you know, in that kind of regard. And so psychically, some folks can get energetically enmeshed, and that's kind of what happens with of course, alcoholism and these things that are getting passed down. It's like it's messy in the biofield, because it's there's so much enmeshment in there. And that's why it's really, really important for folks to truly understand, you know, the healing power of touch and how to do that appropriately, and what you're meeting in that resonance field. I always teach people, what is mine, what is yours, what is ours, and how to feel that space between, because in that, then our intuition opens up, our boundaries open up, so much opens up from being able to tap into that information. Because every relationship, even our conversation, has this energetic field that's like I don't like to say an entity, but it's like a beingness.
It is. It's a separate thing that is emergent and co-created. And you're right. There is such an instinct and an impulse to really fully merge, right? And I think, again, that is very cultural, because there's such cognitive dissonance between our felt sense of what's going on with us and what our trusted leaders are telling us. So we have no cultural other in which to anchor into. And so when we lack that real secure base within self, and we find it within somebody else, and it's immediate, it's just mammalian in nature, you know, so it immediately fills that void, of which most of the time we didn't even know that we had that void, right?
Totally, because it's nonverbal. It's nonverbal, it's implicit, and it's like so young and vulnerable. And you're touching into, a lot of times you're touching into implicit attachment memories, you know, when you're in that, for someone who's, you know, vulnerable, who doesn't know that. And when you're a practitioner, you have to know that and be very careful, because otherwise that merging can be too much merging. And that can be too much when you're crossing over into the other. And so I love getting into the nuance of it all, because it's also very interesting, because it's palpable. You can feel it at the deepest aspects of you, but we often don't have language for it, because this is entirely beyond language. But we are doing a great job trying to articulate it, though, you and I today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so curious about your journey to understand and build relation to the subtle energies, and your ability to feel into that and recognize that. I'm so curious how you sort of got to that place, and how you keep your instrument sort of attuned. I mean, that's in the process where I'm at right now. I'm really trying to honor and hone these psi abilities, for lack of a better term, you know what I mean? And yeah. I think so many of us have this capability.
We all do. We all have this ability. It's taken decades, truly. And I was aware of it when I was very, very young. And I could tell stories, but I'm talking before language. I was aware of it
Mm.
very, very young. And I kept that knowing. And I've always been a seeker. I learned how to read really, really early and just read all these books. And it was just like, I'm still a voracious learner. Just as much as I can learn, I just love it. And I'm deeply curious, so I'd ask a lot of questions. And I went through a series of career burnouts. This is not my first career. I was an executive in the business world, and I burnt out. I've been a professor and a researcher and all these things. And ultimately, a lot of burnout, no matter what I did, you know, kind of to heal, because I would be picking up on, are you familiar with human design at all?
Just a little bit, surface
Okay.
level.
I take everything with like a grain of salt. Like I'm not like a dogmatic on anything, but it was in finding out that I was a reflector, you know, that helped to kind of validate like, oh, I'm picking up on the transpersonal. I'm picking up on the collective. At the end of my 20s, I started to go through kind of a really rapid spiritual awakening. And I started reading all of these different religious and spiritual texts, like from all the different backgrounds. I'm like, oh, it's the same story. It's the same story over and over again. I got really into near-death experiences, and I started having psychic phenomenon. The person I was dating at the time, his mother passed away, and she came to me and she was telling me things. And from there on, it was, you know, it was that Saturn return. I was tapping into so much information, and I almost didn't know what to do with it all. And I started to seeking out spiritual mentors. I sought out long-term, like I said, long-term mentors. And I got a lot of training. I've trained in energy work. I've been a shamanic apprentice for a really, really long time. But the really key thing that I did was I healed my trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm very keen on energy work, because I had a lot of information that kept coming to me from even in the dreams, even when I was trying to sleep, about things I shouldn't know. And that was kind of to keep me energetically safe. Like this was something that had been growing since I was a kid. And I mean, of course, I use these skills with boundaries now, with my work and with people that I love, very, very boundaried for the greater good, not just information coming to me, because so much stuff would come to me.
Mm-hmm.
And you go through a series of initiations in shamanism, like the universe does truly test yourself and almost like plays cosmic jokes on you to see if you're going to come into discernment, if you're going to learn to harness this power, and it will like throw you on your ass too. There were situations where I had to call a shaman because I'm like, ugh, this is too much. But now it's reliable. Like I saw 2020, 15 years ago. I will see people's children come into being. I know what's going on with their health. I know their ancestors. It's absolutely wild, but it makes the work that I do with people really fast, truly, because I'm like reading their subconscious. But it's also empowered me to really trust my intuition. Like I am not, if something's going on, I don't just practice with my clients. Every single morning, every night during the day, I will cleanse my energy. I'm doing practices so that I know what's what. I'm never confused. I know I don't have to like look to anyone outwardly as to what's going on. I can divinate or meditate or dance and it'll come. My writings are mostly just, I'm in a flow state and I'm like, oh, what did I write? You know?
Yeah, I relate so deeply, you know, and I also 30 to 33 similar experience, just transcendent experiences left and right. And, you know, the high highs close to the sun. And then there's always the sort of collapse that comes down. Right. And especially when you're like myself, I didn't have a real framework as to what was going on with me. That's not true. I mean, I did. I'm very psychologically minded. And I think it's only because I had a framework that I was able to stay grounded. Right. But A lot of folks that I see and speak to and that reach out to me that have these experiences, they don't have that same foundation. And so my mission, like above all, is to provide cultural context for these experiences, cultural anchors for these experiences, both on the front end and on the back end, you know. And I see a lot of people get into some deep waters, you know, myself included, within the interpretation of these experiences, right? Because we have the empirical experience, and then it's always the meaning making system on top of it, where then things get a little bit wonky, right? And all the religiosity starts to come up and all of this information, as you said. And I love that you touched on just the importance of defense, right? You don't want to be permeable at all times, but you don't want to be too rigid and narrow as well, right? And so understanding what your practices are that allow you to maintain in that sweet spot. Dance is a huge one for me as well, meditation and really trust in it. And yeah, I'm so excited for how the world of mental health is changing, for how the world of spirituality is changing, and this sort of impending spectral revolution that might be coming down the pipeline here, with an emphasis on parapsychology, which I'm so interested in. And I just think people are ready for it. I think people are hungry for something novel, something new. I think, you know, the illusion of just the pure material and sort of the Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins of the world, I think, you know, that motif is slowly withering away. It has its place for sure, and it has served me greatly, but I'm excited to be a part of something new and something novel and deeply oriented in that mission and in the service, because as you said, you know, it is our pain that really breaks the spell of forgotten divinity. Right. And so, you know, I'm deeply interested in James Hillman's work, and he writes a lot about the daemon, you know, our sort of encoded soul destiny that exists within us. And it only reveals itself through our wounding, through the cracks, through the friction and the trauma, right? There's this true cyclical nature within it. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of folks and there's a lot of souls on this planet that front loaded a lot of their suffering so that they could fully embody that gift, that daemon, and really carry that torch.
Totally. Yeah, that's when I had a massive spiritual awakening, and that's when my soul was like, gave this directive, like, you came here I was near death, like physical death, like actual near death. And my soul was like, you came here to help people to heal. And that's why I've been voraciously learning, and, you know, in order to, because this is natural. It's natural. It's part of our birthright to awaken to our divinity and to know who we truly are and to see through the illusions. And it's not to be pathologized. But we don't have enough good stories. We don't have enough good stories. We don't have enough people that are embodied enough to actually help usher people through the process, because with massive expansion, there comes this contraction period in people, because then that allows the integration. And so many folks, they keep seeking the high highs, but they're in another realm. They're truly somewhere else, most of their body. But that's not where our power is. Our power is here and now, because you can collapse all that down, all of it down. Even the most esoteric, paranormal experiences. Oh, you're on another planet. You're seeing a parallel life. Doesn't matter. You can bring all that energy here and now, and that's where you're the most empowered. But there's just not enough information out there, and people are scared of the experience. And of course, then it gets labeled as all these things, right? So.
Yeah, I love how you framed that, sort of collapsing that down. I have some associations and some ideas, but I'd love if you could explain that a little bit more, if you'd be open to.
So that is how all healing happens in nature. I wrote about this recently. There's expansion. All organisms in nature expand, and then they contract. So this is why often when someone has like a healing experience or a somatic release, that later things pop up again. No, things aren't popping up again. What's coming up is old trauma material that's coming in to be witnessed, received, and brought back in. And this is the integration. Our bodies naturally do this. Trees do it. You know, they they go into winter, they come into spring, and then they fall and they do it. And human bodies are meant to be the same way. The human body connects the soul to this physical realm. And when we have these transcendental experiences, it has to be filtered through our human nervous system. Through our human nervous system has to filter all that out. And so it has to contract. The contraction isn't to be vilified, it's to be honored, because in that contraction, we're moving up the spiral of beingness and spirituality. It gives us another opportunity to bring that in, and for the next time that we're angry or have a transcendental experience, same to me, to the nervous system, that you have more capacity and resource to go to the next round, because there's no end to beingness, right? And so that's what happens. But that's all that's talked about these days, is the peak experiences, and all that's what's fought for. And then folks end up in some messy situation later, but we can plan for that. We know that that's going to happen. I say this all the time, to those that I'm working with, because that's how a human nervous system operates. The spiritual has to be run through the physical, but they're interconnected. They're one and the same.
Yeah, it is. It's nature's titration process, right? And so it's like all this energy that is bound, energy and information that is bound in our bodies and in our nervous system. And I believe it's often very close to our spine, and that center plane right there. And so you have the energy sort of become unbound, and it comes on up, information, emotion, feeling, whatever it is, as much as the system can sort of hold.
Exactly.
And then there's that intelligence that's in there. And then the contraction and the energy starts to bound back down again.
Exactly.
Until we get greater orientation, containment, and then we'll go through that next oscillation process. And so once again, I would have liked to have known this 4 years ago, but it comes through experience without a doubt. And I'm really grateful that, the folks that I was around during this time, because if I had been around other people and other clinicians, there would have been some different takes, right? There would have been some different takes, and maybe.
Yeah, but how did you handle it though? How did your soul guide you through it? Because you had some impulse there to guide yourself. Like, what happened?
Yeah, I did. I mean, it's I haven't gotten too deep into it, and especially publicly though. But I'm happy to. I'm happy to. No, I'm happy to share. Books, not wanting to save face. I'd rather save my ass than save face. And deep prayer, deep communion with other, deep meditation, and deep trust, and trusting in the synchronicities, trusting in the symbols that were presenting themselves, trusting in the love and the magic that I have and that I felt from my family, and so lucky that I had that. And also, I think also the biggest trap, and the biggest trap that I fell into, and maybe a little bit of this is gendered, but there's also the spiritual pride that comes, the spiritual righteousness, right? And that comes from the interpretation and the, this knowing, right? And that power, the sense of power, empowerment that comes with it. People can really get lost in that sauce as well, right? And we see the cult leaders, all sorts of people. And again, the discernment and the eldership, because I got so turned off from life coaching spaces, from plant medicine spaces, because I was witnessing friends and myself and these practitioners and these people who were serving medicine. And then within communities, it's just like codependency and manipulation and just narcissism run awry and just absolute madness. But all of the language and all of the information that your body thinks it's getting from the other nervous, it's very enrolling. It's very hypnotizing in this sense. And so people get really, really stuck in that. And so on top of those peak experiences, I think it's just as important, as you said, to talk about the grounding of that and the differentiation from the experience. I think it's really important to hold differentiation from it as well. Totally.
It's so important. We can read all we can about it, but nothing describes like a full-blown Kundalini experience, awakening, and all of that. You can't even good luck reading about that and then going through that,
Yeah.
right? So of course, like I have a lot of compassion for your situation because of you're doing the best that you could, and so's everybody else. What's happening is just very simple in those spaces is just it's not integrated. There's been a half awakened experience. It hasn't been integrated. There hasn't been that eldership and that mentorship, that discernment. And then, there's the Messiah complex that comes in because, the what has happened through, some of the distortions in some of the dogmatic religion is been woven into New Age, and and it's still kind of that, it's kind of like that hypnotic. It's not organ playing, but it's like now you're something to hypnotize, and then the language. And if you don't use the language, then you're cast out of the group, and that touches into some deep wounding, like you don't belong. And then, so of course it all happened.
Yeah. And that's the thing about, a savior complex is that you can't have a savior complex without also having a persecution complex. Right. And that's something that I've had to walk through and get really, really clear on that. I had some rough experiences in my late teens and early 20s. And, within the last 6 months to a year, I've actually been having a lot of memories return and sense memories from a particular experience that happened to me at 20. Right. And it took 10 years really for it to like fully return back in my consciousness. Like I had a sort of sense memory of it, and I knew my body held it, but some of the reason and the interpretation and the more like intellectual side, it really has taken time for me to hold that, shoot, I had another important thought and now it's gone. It'll come back.
Memories are fragmented for a reason, because it's like, it's too much, right? Yeah,
exactly.
We're talking about, I love that you addressed and looked at your savior and your persecutor complex, because it's so important for people that are in any healing professions to actually look at that shadow within themselves. The therapy world came out of the pastoral counseling. Like it came, that's how the therapy world a lot of times came into being. And so, and there's this pedestal, there's sometimes either you put yourself on it or someone puts you on it because you're the expert, right? And so you really do have to look at that. You have to, and I sat with this, when you posted about it the day that you said something about this, I sat with that very same question for 5 years. Like, why did I get into, this line of work? Like, really, why did I get into this line of work? And, it breaks apart the ego to really look at that. It's like, oh, I'm a martyr and I'm a messiah. Like, are these archetypes within that are like not integrated, So
yeah,
for you for looking at it.
When I fully, and it came with that sort of first transcendent experience that I had, all this information that came into me, and there was a very, very clear knowing around why I got into this work, but both sides of it, right? The light and the shadow. But really looking at the relational seeds of that within my family of origin, epigenetically, etc. And I had such a visceral, embodied reaction to that understanding that I just started excommunicating. I was like, I'm getting out of therapy. Like, I'm done. I told my supervisor, like, I'm out of here. And then also, it really illuminated my relationships as well, because I realized not only was I doing this in a therapeutic room or like the motivation of that, the seeds of it were all over my relationships, male friend relationships, romantic relationships. There was, such an understanding on how my nervous system and my sort of the spongy nature of my nervous system, how that can be misappropriated by folks and by myself, really, because it's me and my own boundaries. But I just remember so deeply and showing up to work and talking to my supervisor and telling her that I had this experience and was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore at all. Now that I know, like, wow. And so that was really the catalyst for, okay, there's got to be a better way. And I do have this wisdom. I do have this experience. And maybe, the pen is mightier than the sword. Maybe I can, share this gift in a different way that isn't so energetically expensive on my nervous system, because I served that role for basically and everybody in my life, and happy to, right? But it
Yeah.
is a scarce resource, and I would prefer to, use that resource with folks that I really, really deeply love and care about, right? Not selfishly, but just from a place of understanding my own human limitations. And now,
Yeah.
on the contrary, 3 years later, after the integration on the back end of it, I'm finding myself stepping back into that role with a new knowing, with a new discernment, with a new permeability. And I feel like it was a necessary part of the journey, and super, super useful for me.
I love that. I love that you kept going, because when we move from these unconscious protection responses, to being more conscious and actually choosing to serve, choosing to be in the relationships, choosing not from a place of I have to help you to be okay. I have to cross my boundaries so that I belong. And it's the depth of the presence in the relationships can be very different, but what you and I both are not saying yet is that it may change how you show up in the world to look at these things, and you may not have some of the same friendships, relationships, or orient yourself to the work in the same way. And then I will say that there's something entirely after that that's like beautiful and amazing, that's often not talked about, but that part is sometimes why people they'll never heal, because their wounding is getting so much, I don't know, kind of like feedback from like the helping. Because it's like a sense of belonging, and so many people will burn out over and over again just because they're receiving some of that, and they won't, because to your process, that was a 3-year-long process. Mine was 5, but it's like, okay, we're averaging 4 years of like some existential questioning, suffering, not knowing in our lives to really look at that.
Yeah. I mean, existential on the just absolute deepest layer too. I mean, when that veil is thin, but there's something sexy about it. And that's why people get trapped too, right? There's something sexy, there's something fun, there's some sort of power that feels, there's a terminal uniqueness that is often attached to that, right? And so I do feel like I got a little bit lost in that sauce, to be completely honest, as we all do. And as you touched on, right, like there were a lot of relationships that weren't able to continue as I stepped onto this new platform. And I think a lot about the sense of, it's like a phrase I like to use, is unchosen obligation, right? Is like, I am so available and willing to show up for just about anything when it's chosen. But I have such a reaction to any aspect of unchosen obligation as it shows up in relationship. And I probably get a little ruthless with it. Sometimes I can get a little, excommunicative, and that's not the appropriate response either. There's a middle ground there. But I think there's something to that, without a doubt.
Yeah, coming into that individuation and then moving past individuation to like interconnection. It's such a unique process for each of us, but we have to do it to come into our autonomy and our agency. And but even as you get, I'm probably in another decade of my life than you are, and it just kind of keeps going like that, because you're just not available for nonsense. I'm not available for superficial things and nonsense and stuff that's not for me. My body just it's immediate no. And I can't force it anymore. I can't pretend. I don't mask or do the things that I did in the past. And that may look differently for different people. Oh, Shannon, you think you've changed. And they're saying it in a way like they're not really excited that I've changed. So sometimes inner work, it's not really celebrated. And that's why it's really important to be around at least a couple of people that are doing it too, so you can kind of have each other's backs, so you don't feel so alone in the process. Because whose employer or whose partner is going to be I'm not available for all of this emotional labor that I was doing. I'm going to work less hours. Like, people are not like, oh, good for you. They're not, because they're like, well, who's going to pick up the slack? This is what you used to do. Why aren't we doing this anymore?
And that projective identification, right? When you stop behaving in a way that allows the other person to externalize their own stuff onto you so that you can then behave a certain way that then validates their own perspective about who they think they are. Suddenly they're like, wait, what a minute. And they'll try every little tactic to get that back. You know what I mean? And we all fall into the trap. I've fallen into that trap. And you know what I think equally as important within this conversation is, you know, within this process and this process of individuation, there's something so specific that happens within our relationship to culture. And, you know, I wrote my graduate thesis on rites of initiation and rites of passage, really with an emphasis on the liminality, the space between, right? Which is the name of my Substack of my brand, the liminal means. And one thing that was very, very clear within all of these rites were the paradox within ceremonial space, within liminal space, because simultaneously you have this deconstruction of self and culture, removing the lens of the culture in which you're in so that you're left with your raw base individuality and humanness. But then on the back end of that, it is then the cultural relationship that you are then fully integrating with purpose and with mission. So there's a paradox where you have to almost, not have to, very often you have this reaction to the cultural shadow of which we're metabolizing in those spaces. Not only are we metabolizing our individual shadow, we're metabolizing our cultural shadow as well. And you can see that. And I think a lot of people have a reaction to that cultural shadow. And they're just, I need to remove myself from the world, deaf to the world. This is all bad, material doesn't even exist, you know, and just completely go the opposite direction. And I don't think that's the appropriate reaction either, right? If you're doing shadow work and you don't on the back end feel more inspired and motivated to plug into culture from this new, healthier platform, then I think maybe, you know, you should ask a couple more questions there.
Yeah. I mean, where I've kind of summarized it for people is I say, sometimes in your healing process, you will encounter your individual trauma, but your shadow trauma, wounding, however you want to word it, your ancestral, but also the collective, cultural, sometimes transpersonal, and sometimes beyond. And all of that, it's okay. It's natural. People that are labeled neurodivergent are picking up on a lot of those data points and sometimes over identifying with that if they don't understand the subtle energies. You know, that could be a whole other conversation. But it's not to go into nihilism, and it's not to go hide in, you know, a cave for the rest of your life. It's really to empower you and to understand how interconnected we really are and how much you can, through your own individual beingness and healing, can change the rhythms of the entire society through your own consciousness, through your own walking through the world. That's why I love some of the, you know, research from like the heart math, so that to show that, you know, for some individuals, them stepping into a room because they're regulated and they've worked through a lot of this, they can change how the room is feeling and how people are sensing. And so, you know, I don't know, I'm a weirdo, and I went the other way. I'm like, oh, I feel so empowered. Like I'm picking up on this. Oh, I can, you know, I can commune with this being, and I know this, and it's empowering for me because I like to integrate that. I like to run that through my body, and I do a consciousness cleanse. What do I keep? What am I updating? What is leaving on behalf of all beings, right? Because we're all interconnected. That's my viewpoint. That's like my world viewpoint that I've come into after, you know, doing the work. And it seems to be more universal as folks kind of encounter their from the body, from the soma. So many people are so shocked by doing somatic work that they tap into the transpersonal, they tap into the ancestral and the spiritual, because that's how we are made.
Absolutely. And the field, right? That collective field, right? And I'm so excited to see how like the merging of biology and physics and psychology and mental health. And you touched on it right there with the heart math and the coherence. And I am a huge, huge fan of Joe Dispenza, been to one of his retreats. I mean, once you have an experience like that, it's hard to go back to hey, here's 5 ways to approach your anxiety, right? Which has its place, of course, you know what I mean? But and once you really begin to understand the metabolic implications on mental health as well too, right? And in the way our body metabolizes time, you know, all of these different novel things and ideas and these fields that are beginning to merge, I hope will revolutionize the way that we approach this and create more interconnectedness, more synergy, more multidisciplinary approaches. I'm such a believer. I'm such a believer in that. And it's only because like the direct experiences that I've had through that process and the way that my body and biology responded as a result of that process, whether it's in deep meditation or, you know, whatever it is. Yeah. So
yeah, it's so important for us to share our stories. Like I've had so many experiences. I meditated and saw cancer, and I was diagnosed with cancer and then, you know, released it. The other day I slammed my hand into a metal door and I'm like, oh, wow, this really, really hurts. But then I meditated and somatically, you know, sent it back to the earth because I'm able to look at the inside of my body and feel that. And over and over and over, people are able to do that. These stories that people tell are not one-off. This is how humans, once you get beyond the conditioned mind, you know, it's truly integrating the right brain, because folks are so in their left brain logic that they cut themselves off from intuition. So however you want to look at it, science and spirit, logic and intuition, sometimes people call it masculine and feminine, but it's integrating that into wholeness. And it's tapping into that more of that right brain, but you have to come through from top down. You know, that's why I teach people all about how their nervous system works, their body top down to understand. And so the mystical, you know, can happen through the body.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. In this sense that, you know, the brain is a receiver of consciousness. It doesn't generate it, right? And it's a receiver of thoughts. And so, you know, and there's a lot of, you know, research and interesting stuff coming out around, you know, our organs have actual behavioral memory within them. And our heart has its own little mini nervous system, right? And so a lot of these feelings, thoughts, experiences that we're having, we're receiving them from our biofield and from our organs, right? But if that's the case, then it also informs us that in relationship, we're also receiving them from other people's organs as well too, other people's biofields.
Exactly. And, you know, with my trauma history, I was very, very sick, and what I was sensing was other a lot of the time, not my own, because I had to be enmeshed just, you know, to survive. And it was truly coming into me, what is mine. So I can sense and feel now when I meet in the resonance field, I know, oh, I wasn't feeling that way a second ago. Like that's theirs. And so I don't have to identify with that. I don't have to get involved in that. That's not mine. That's not my thought. You know, feeling a thought like come across, that's not mine. That's not mine to grasp onto.
Yeah,
you know, to be able to know that is so, for me, it was life-changing to be like, oh, whew, I don't have to get involved in all that.
It's not a prescription, right?
No.
Yeah, absolutely. It's huge. But it takes a necessary amount of stability and differentiation and metacognition. You know, I think that's one of my biggest challenges as a practitioner and as a writer, et cetera, right? Is like, okay, so I'm here. And it's so easy to forget how I got here and what some of those platforms were that I was standing on to get me here, and being able to, you know, apply language and really meeting people where they're at. And I also I have such an adverse reaction to this idea of like stages of consciousness. Like, oh, there's like a hierarchy of consciousness and these stages. Like, it's just nonsense. It's nonsense. No. I'm not interested in any conflict, you know, duality, stages, battle. Like, no, it's like there is a energy source that is available that will force multiply your life, and it will meet you wherever you're at. Wherever you're at, it will meet you at the peak of that, and then it will form the next one. And it's not about climbing Jacob's ladder to holding this stage of consciousness, and it's not about chasing states either, right? It's about where is your relationship to this energy right now? Where is it bound? Where is it unbound? How can we free it up? How can we then apply discernment so that then you feel a call to action, right? Which also I think is people get lost too. They sort of drop the ball right before that call to action.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's really hard to articulate, you know, all the ways that you get to this point. And, you know, it's through pervasive suffering. And that's the universal human experience. And, you know, what I see over and over again for people is why I asked you earlier in our conversation, like, what did you do? Because there's always, even if it feels inaccessible, like some wisdom, like you read books, there's always some wisdom. There's always so many people forget about their own, even the ancestral wisdom, because our ancestors survived too, and they survived some way. So it's usually those impulses that sometimes we may even shame ourselves for having, that gets us through, and everybody has access to that. But to your point, yeah, it can be so hard to kind of remember, oh my gosh, how did I, you know, like when I was in the thick of like taking all these medications and near death, like, oh yeah, I surrendered, which is, I don't like that word, but I surrendered as if I was going to die. And I laid on my porch for like 3 days because I was like, well, I'm going to die. So I'm just going to let go of all of it, let everything. And then it was in that this massive, you know, awakening happened. And that, of course, you don't want to recommend something like that.
For sure. I think that there are less destabilizing ways. And again, right, I mean, this is in literature and this is in, you know, the yogic traditions, right? You prepare the body and you prepare these channels and the subtle energies and all of this. Like, you don't want to just blast open your top 2-3 chakras just willy-nilly. You want to have that grounding, and it doesn't have to be intense. It doesn't, you know, there is a more layered, spiritually scientific way that won't bring that same intensity and heaviness on the nervous system as well too, because it's a lot.
It can be a lot. You know, part of where somatics came alive for me is I had meditated for decades. Moving meditation. I used to be, I'm a big weightlifter. I'm a big, like, I like weightlifting, yoga, dancing, moving my body. And I was not meditating in like some prescriptive way. I was just noticing my breath. And it was in noticing my breath that I felt a panic attack come on, and it didn't. It was the first time in my life that, because of meditation practice, I was like, that's what opened the door for me for somatics. And it was decades. I had read information, you know, just like most people do. I read all of the information. I had practice. I did all the guided meditation. And then things started to change, you know, for me and my health. That was super empowering to notice, oh, okay, this really works. And that got me into more, you know, polyvagal and somatic experiencing, and to really understand the science of the body, you know, beyond all the spiritual information, but like, how does the nervous system work? You know, what is neuroscience? How is the brain and the body really physically interconnected? Because then, you know, but unfortunately our culture doesn't get really excited about these like slow and subtle stories of like just mindfulness, you know, that's not gonna like, people aren't gonna like that post of like, yeah, another day of nothing happening and me just observing my breath. But eventually, like I said, like it did start to change. And now I don't have a lot of thoughts. I have creative thoughts, but I don't have, because of decades of meditation and these practices, and I'm supposed to, because I apparently have ADHD, which I don't know, but likewise. I don't have that like racing mind.
Yeah, I know. It's, my brother was telling me, you know, well, we were talking about just this sense of like, you know, the idea that some people's minds are just racing all the time. And he had this sense like, what do you mean? What do you mean you're thinking thoughts all the time? What do you mean like your mind is racing, like it's constant and da 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 da? And like, I didn't know that some people don't have that experience, that little hint of mania or whatever it may be. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know that some people don't have a consistent running dialogue of like some type of little civil war going on in their head
They don't.
at all times. I mean, that was my reality for 10 years. I just didn't know there was another way. I had no idea until I began to experience it.
Me too. I didn't even believe when people said that. I thought it was bullshit when they would say that. And I was like, none of this works. Like my brain, I mean, I couldn't sleep. I had a laundry list of mental health diagnosis, all of it trauma. And now my mind is like a tool and calm. And I innately process through my body. My body informs me first. And my mind, if I ask, it'll come in, but it's my entire way I orient through reality is completely different than several decades ago because of these things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and when you were talking about the somatics, and, you know, I put out a piece recently, and there was something that a piece of literature that I ran into, and something clicked for me, you know, this looking at the temporal parietal junction, in that, you know, the same part of our brain that is responsible for our body's spatial orientation, where we are in space, is the same part of our brain that lights up during transcendence, wonder, and awe, right? And so like the body is literally a 5D portal. But it is this bilateral integration, right? Because the TPJ sits on both sides.
Yeah.
And anyways, I'm still working on that idea, but I find it so interesting. And how can we bilaterally integrate that, right? And so I do that a lot in martial arts. I do it in dance. I do it. There's all sorts of fun, easy ways to somatically get that bilateral piece going, right? Get some vestibular activation. And the sense of wholeness that comes in the body is really remarkable. And then, as you said, the emotion and the thoughts really follow, because our cognitive regulation is downstream from our sensory motor regulation.
Totally. Here's a practice, because this works. So whatever kind of thought, if someone is stuck on, it's feeling the thought, but like setting it outside kind of you, like not being totally in it, and then going for just a fast walk. I do this walking and hiking all the time. If I'm like struggling with something, and I don't try to do or change anything, but left, right. And what I'm feeling is the left and the right side of my body with this thought. Now the thought, I am feeling it inside, how it somatically influences my nervous system. I'm not thinking about the thought, I'm feeling the thought. And so left and right, 20 minutes, I've processed through whatever it is. And then creativity is on the other side of that. So a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to do it because I don't want to encounter all those icky feels. And I'm like, well, first of all, you're walking. Hopefully it's out in nature. Nature is a co-regulator. So talk to the trees, put your hand on them, feel some dirt, smell the air, but it will change after. I've done this for decades, and it moves it through. And then, you know, if I go out for 20 minutes and then come back, and the 20 minutes on the way back, it's like creativity, because it's opened up all the space in the body. But I'm really paying attention to the left and the right side of my body, as if I'm like moving it through energetically my body.
I know it so deeply. I know it so deeply. Yeah. And I always tell people too, in that process, really grounding, like, your gait as you walk, like your big toe is supposed to be the last piece that leaves the ground there. And so really being able to feel into the emphasis of that right and left as you're walking. I mean, the woman who discovered EMDR, she discovered it while she was walking through a forest.
Yeah.
Right. And she noticed her eyes would have little hitches as she would cross bilateral planes. And so I think it's really interesting too, just like our visual cortex, like we hold like 90% of our stress stimulus is all through the visual plane. Just sensory overload. We have so much emphasis on our visual sense. And you see there's a lot of symbolism, esoteric symbolism of just a cross, an axis point, right? Medicine wheels, all this stuff, 4 directions. And so within our visual plane, if you have that cross right there, I'm not 100% on the neuroscience, but each sort of quadrant correlates to a different aspect of the brain. So how you're moving your attention within those 4 quadrants, you're shifting your perception within that. And there's a lot of really fun, intentional ways to utilize that and to fully integrate and create synchrony within those two hemispheres.
Yeah, because the back of the eyes, that's the part of your nervous system. And a lot of people will have like really tight eye muscles, and a lot of people are on screens, and so they're on screens, they're crunched in, and we humans were meant to see the horizon. And a lot of people haven't been outside, they haven't seen the horizon, then everything, your perception, everything starts shrinking in, and we're not able to access
Periphery.
Other options. Or periphery and going outside. So I create a lot of practices so that we're like, we're softening the eyes and feeling your eye sockets, but you're orienting around. And somatic experiencing, I the first year of the training, I almost was like, what are we doing? Like, we're orienting, we're looking around all of the time. And I was like, what in the world? But I get it. By the time I finished, I was like, okay, like this is powerful. Because when when your body and your thoughts too are, you know, kind of like having these somatic flashbacks or emotional flashbacks or these memories, we're in trauma time. But when you're looking around to the periphery and around you, you're reminding your body that you're actually here now. And that can help process so much. And we have our whole bodies, we have our eyes with us all the time. And we've never taught how to tap into these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with Les Fime, open focus training, open focus meditation. It really centers around this. He was a huge inspiration for Dispenza as well. And so, you know, one of the ways I like to explain it for folks and for anybody listening, right, in the sense that, you know, the state of the nervous system is your filter for reality. And you just nailed it right there, right? So when you're in that sympathetic, all of your energy, the allotment of your energy is so tight, just and narrow and rigid on exactly what it is that's in front of you. Great for focus, whatever, right? So that you can fight, flee, whatever it may be. And so literally your acuity in your sense acuity is shortened. You don't have access to as much information, creativity, novel thoughts, etc. So literally being able to diffuse our energy through our proprioception, through the way our body is relating to the space around us. And suddenly I'm permeable. Like, I feel the extension of my body into this room all the way, right? And my awareness is just broadened out completely. I have peripheral vision again. And then the thinking and the relaxation and that sort of sense of ease follows because it's all downstream.
And now I feel better because you stretched out, right? Like, because it's like communicating. I was like, you stretched out, but I felt like I stretched.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. And also, right. And so, you know, I was an athlete for a long time too. And again, I'm such a multidisciplinary. And so I think about posture and screens and all that. We have forward head posture, rounded shoulders, tightened up in here, inflammation, right? We're not getting cerebral spinal fluid up into our brain so that it can rinse and wash it through. And so literally just changing your gait, changing your posture, changing your breathing mechanics. Like, I think that should be like baseline number one before we even get into trauma work, before we do the deeper psycho-emotional work.
Have you stretched? How are you breathing? You know, these really basic things that just aren't ever discussed because your nervous system state creates your beliefs, your stories of yourself, other world spirit. And there's something that you can do with that. And some of these things are just very, very simple. Like, I cannot imagine starting my day and like not stretching and opening up my spine. Like, I can't, but I lived like that for a really long time. And of course my body was in chronic pain. And then people are on social media trying to heal, but they're like in these little boxes and they're crunched in and they're, you know, scrolling. And I'm just like, what is going on here? Like, this is the exact opposite of how healing and wholeness happens. And, you know, I mean, it's almost like it's by design, you know, at this point where people are like,
oh, there we go. I lost you for a second. Yeah. Sorry, I was putting my charger back in my computer, so that's why I was distracted for a second. Yeah, I mean, there is a mass disassociation that's happening, and maybe the largest collective dissociation events in human history over the last 5-6 years. You know, and so I'm such like a faith-driven person, and so I love the fact that you used that word design, and I don't, you know, need to follow that rabbit hole too deeply, right? But there is, do you know who Ken Wilber is? Are you familiar with Ken Wilber? Yeah. Okay. So I love the way he talks about the quadrants and like the different aspects of truth, right? And so there's kind of 3 coexisting truths that are happening at all times. One of them is just our truth. What is our individual experience, the I? And then there's an intersubjective truth. What is the agreed upon we within culture? And then there's the truth of the it, which is just the objective, these systems, kind of this more right-handed path. And they all hold different fractals of truth. And you can't just, you know, amputate one and leave the other behind. We have to be able to hold all of them. And so for me, what that means is that I also have to be fully involved in the world, right? I have such a reaction to the people's sense of just like the physical so bad, the material, just like it's all Maya illusion, it's all fake, it's all it's like, no, it's all of it. There's something there too. There's some truth and some magic even within the systems, even within the conflict. There is some design within the fracturing, because as we know from our perspective, I mean, that's without friction, we have no action. So we have no life, right? And looking at physics. And so we were born from friction and trauma and birth trauma. The universe was created from friction and trauma, you know. Even that word trauma brings up so many associations. You know, the importance of language too, that's a whole other conversation.
I love that you're pointing out, you know, different elements of truth, because so many folks can get pulled along. This is the truth. This is the truth. The more that you awaken, the more that you can even realize, just from even the individual level, like this is this person's truth, and this is this person's truth, and this is true. It's all true. You know, and sometimes it can be at odds with one another, but you know, when you awaken, you can understand that and hold this complexity. You can hold and be with all of these different levels of truth without threatening you. It's so important, you know, to be able to encounter that. And a lot of times people, especially in the West, it's this weird, bizarre phenomenon. It's kind of it's kind of almost infantile, where it's very individualistic, right? It's very individualistic, and it's cutting itself off from world and other and being engaged, because true integration means interconnection, means that you are co-creating the world in which you want to live in, that you want to be a legacy for either your future kin or just a future kin of all kind, your community. You're actively involved. And a full integrated human is involved in their own personal experience and is involved in relational, other experience, their family, their community, the world at large, because there's so many wonderful, like enlightened, wonderful, beautiful humans that are doing wonderful things. Your future best friend is out there somewhere. And if you're just stuck in your own inner experience, that's going to cause suffering. And that's actually, humans are meant to be relational. We are relational beings. That's what separates us from mammals. Like, we can talk, we can communicate. You know, we have evolved to exist within a community, and to go fully individualistic or only community and not having individualistic, you know, sometimes there's some suffering there to not be integrated, to stay on one side or the other too much.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't subscribe to the full, you know, postmodern, there is no truth. It's all subjective and conflicting truths and Like I do think that there are fundamental truths within different quadrants and within different orientations. Right. And so I think, you know, I'm not really sure what's going on, you know, right now within the pulse. I think there maybe is this renaissance within a sort of, you know, left-handed path of this empirical truth and empirical knowing, and, you know, direct communion with something bigger. It doesn't have to go through a church or any other guru, et cetera, right? There is sort of this deep thirst and pull towards empirical truth, which is so fundamental, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if that empirical truth is in direct conflict to an intersubjective truth, right, then there's a gap there. And it's like, okay, sure, that was true for you in experience, but where's the connective tissue from beyond just self into that other, like you shared,
Mm-hmm.
right? And is there some sort of collective truth that we can lean on that creates a greater call to action, not necessarily to surrender to other, but to be in willful communion with other, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really like there's a circle to it, right? So we have this empirical subjective truth into an intersubjective truth, and then hopefully from that all the way up into this more sort of objective it of like, okay, and now what can you do about it in the material, in the building, with your hands, right? And so there's washing through that cycle. I think that's it for me. It's been really helpful to think of things through that lens.
Yeah. It's also super empowering because it brings in it brings in kind of the magician archetype of like, oh, I smiled at this person. I talked to them and they connected and I felt good. And that made their day better, right? Like there's so many instances, there's so many choices throughout the day that we can choose to really connect to the other, to whoever is available. And there's so many good people out there. If we only stay on social media shows like the maybe 1 to 10% of these outlier scenarios, right? That's not true reality. If you go and get out in your community, go and really live your life out loud, you're going to be presented with a lot of data points as to like, wait a minute, that's not what I'm being showed. That's not really happening. People are good.
Big time. Yeah. I always say that like jokingly, and my friends give me a hard time. They call me the mayor because I love it. I'm out there, I'm shaking hands, saying hi. Everyone knows me. I go into the coffee shop. It's like I find such joy in just being involved and engaged in my life and engaged with people. And like you said, like really getting out there and shaking hands and showing curiosity, being interested in other people and being interested in life. I think that is such an antidote to suffering, is to sort of look beyond the lens of self in any capacity, because so much suffering and in so many ways it's, self-will and self-absorption really on steroids with nuance, right? There's very real tragedies, systemic oppression, all of that stuff as well too, so it is. But these are the conversations. These are the conversations that I'm just so excited to keep having, and we need more of it. It's great. It's great.
Wonderful. Yeah. To mature, it's truly maturity, to move beyond. There's part of the path where it's, you honor your suffering and you honor your own process, but part of the integration is interconnection. And that's just how humanity has always meant to be. There's all these people ask me, oh, Shannon, what's your greatest spiritual practice? The most transcendental one? I'm like, showing up present to my child, with my dog, with my family, my friends, and my community, like really connecting and being playful and curious. That's my spiritual connection, like going outside, being with nature, to really absorb and then feel it all. There's thousands of experiences every day. And I'm really big on savoring, those moments, and it transformed your life to live like that.
It does. Big time. Yeah. Good.
Well, this was wonderful.
Where we got. Yeah, it was super fun. What's next for you? What are you thinking about? What you working on? What's next?
Yeah, well, I have updated some of my offerings. I wanted to bring in, of course, I have some of the trauma healing, somatic. I love somatic experiencing. I love it. And I integrate that with my work. I've been working on a protocol for the last 10 years and I've been using it. It's integrative and it's trauma informed and people heal rapidly. So I've integrated that into my work and put that out there more publicly. But I also have some really fun mystical things that I'm doing, teaching embodied mysticism and mentorship and doing some work with some entrepreneurs. So yeah, and writing. I love writing. So I look forward to seeing you on Substack. What's next for you? What are you writing about right now? I'm so interested in that.
Yeah, so I'm working on a book. It's, you know,
Ooh,
maybe 70% done or so.
it's
And
exciting.
so I've dropped a lot of the big ideas on Substack up to this point. I'm keeping some of the juicier ones in my back pocket for the book. But, you know, really the main thesis is this sense of, you know, what should be processed within a group field in coherence and in community is now instead pathologized in individuals. And so again, I'm using the archetype of the alcoholic as kind of this example, looking at that split within that archetype. There's kind of this Jekyll Hyde thing that shows up, and connecting that to a cultural split as well. So I'm going to share a little bit about my own journey as well, and some of these experiences and my own, you know, door into, you know, divine madness or whatever. But the book is called The Gift of Madness. And my hope is that it's going to come out in October, just plugging away on it. You know, I realized that I got online and, you know, short form or video stuff and whatever. And I didn't realize how much thirst I had for depth and complexity. And just a forum of a tweet or a reel or whatever it is, it really doesn't nourish me at all. And so, you know, my entire like hierarchy of values of what's important to me in life and in my work has completely shifted over the last 3 years. And I've completely shifted from like short-term thinking of like, let's get online, let's make some money, let's help some people. It's like, okay, what is this really, really like, what do I want to plant my flag in truly long term? And so that's a big thing for me. I spent a lot of time as a TV actor as well for 6-7 years. And so there will be a return to that, more on the writing and producing and hopefully directing side. I've dipped my toes in all 3 of those domains as well too. And then I'm thinking about going and getting my PsyD. You know, I got my master's at Pacifica Graduate Institute, depth orientation, you know, analytical psychology, Jungian based school. And so from that MA, I can fold right into the PsyD, and I could have it within the next like 3.5 years. And so that kind of feels like a no brainer to be able to do that. And, you know, I'm way more invested in mastery in this domain than I ever was before, because, I mean, whatever, I'm not going to filter the judgment of how it might sound, but I feel like I have the potential to be world-class in this domain. And it would be a shame to not honor that and follow that thread as far as it'll possibly take me. So,
yeah, you need to see it through. So many people will benefit from it. Wonderful. I mean, it's really about the craft. Yeah. I mean, the nuance and the depth, it's so regulating to like the soul. It's just, you're doing legacy work. Like, this is going to grow trees that you'll never see, but people will sit under, and it's going to help so many people. I cannot wait for your book. I love that topic, and it is exactly what is happening. The most sensitive person is the person that ends up, you know, needing support and care, because they're the ones filtering what's happening.
Exactly.
And
they're metabolizing culture at the edge. They are our spiritual scouts. Yeah. And so I'm really deeply interested in evolutionary spirituality and how that relates to tribal thinking and in groups versus out groups, and the real utility of spirituality within our biology and within our evolution. That's why I partly brought up Ken Wilber again, but I'm so interested in the utility of spiritual practice beyond just on the individual level, right? And so and the emphasis of that, and how that the lineage of that has carried throughout history and throughout culture. So
that's so important, because what's about to happen is going to cause people to move more into community and more into spirituality more than ever. And there's not enough guidance in that. There's not enough, especially in the West, there's just not enough information. So that that folks don't end up in community. Yeah, there's con artists because people are suffering. And you know, spirituality gives a sense of belonging, community. What do I believe? Because it's too complex, and not everyone's like you and I, who like, I like to dance in complexity and like, oh, there's so many different data points. I love it. But people are going to want answers, and it's going to get kind of weird. We're going to see the rise of cults and a lot of harm. So your book is right on time if you're listening to your soul. I love that.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, the book has been like chasing me for 5-7 years, the theme, the idea. And it just got to this point where it was like, I actually don't have an option. I either dive into this fully or I'm unfulfilled. And that's not
You're
an
gonna
option
get sick.
for me, right?
You'll get sick spiritually. It will, you won't be able to be.
That's it.
Whole, not like whole, not that you're not whole, but you won't be able to be fulfilled.
It's there's a quote from the Gospel of Thomas, right? And Jesus says, I'm going to butcher it, but if you bring forth what is within you will save you. If you deny what is within you, what you deny will destroy you. Yeah. And it's the sense of that daemon of what wants to come through this, the restless whisper of our soul. Right? Because our vices are loud, our complexes are loud, but underneath that, there is a restless whisper. And for me, it's always that whisper where the alignment is, where the divinity is seeking to come through me. Yeah. And so my only job, and like, I'm not confused at all. Like, my only job is to just keep my channel as clear as possible so that this information can come through me. And I don't truly, and I know however it sounds, like it's not about me. It's about the ideas and what wants to come through me. Yeah. And it removes so much pressure when I apply faith to the consciousness of the ideas, because I'm incredibly limited. I am an incredibly limited human being, right? And so it's not about that. It's not about that.
I understand. You surrender and you let God, the universe, work through you. And it's a trust fall. I call it a trust fall to the universe. It's bizarre to our small self. It's bizarre because it's like, how did that even happen? I don't even cognitively know, but that's your calling. It's the healing impulse of the universe, and you're the receiver of that information. And so you have to usher that information through for the collective, for yourself, for the collective, both, same.
Exactly. And a part of this came from the acceptance of how much I sort of am on the edge in my own neurodivergency, in my own thinking, in my own emotional life. Like, I didn't realize that the way I feel, the way I think, the way I sense, like, isn't really the norm until the last couple of years. And so it makes a lot of sense why I've been metabolizing what I've been metabolizing spiritually and emotionally, right? And the other thing that I think is really important here, just in this conversation around spirituality and spiritual mastery, I really like to try and ground it with this sense of, I don't feel any differentiation between relational mastery and spiritual mastery. And so a lot of people, how do I develop a spiritual practice? How do I, it's like, oh, you actually look to your relationships, right? The spiritual growth is in the conversations that you're avoiding, the things you're unwilling to say, right? The resentments that you're holding, right? God is within the people closest to you, right? And learning how to honor that with eldership, with discernment, with communion, then it completely shifts that relationship to other, right? And then from there, maybe some new information will begin to reveal itself.
Yeah. So many times people think spirituality is like outside of you, but if I stare for a couple minutes into my child's eyes, I mean, it's a spiritual experience, to be able to be that deeply connected, but it's these energies that you want to bring alive, like playfulness and connection and curiosity within the relationships. And that's where you see where you're at emotionally and spiritually. For me, are same. I often use them interchangeably because that's how we come into, you can't even explain it. You can't explain when you are in a deep conversation and connecting with someone and looking them in their eyes. It's only like music or art, I mean, you're going to write a whole book to try to even articulate it. And you're going to probably have to write other books because it'll just archetype after archetype about, how the different ways that humans are mirroring this experience.
Big time. Yeah. I love it. That's
I
so
can't
good.
wait. I'm so excited for your book. The world needs it. Oh, I was hoping that maybe that would be the topic that because I've been trying to put it together. I'm like, what is he writing about? So thank you for letting me
Yeah,
know and those watching what you're writing about, because it is needed.
absolutely. And then the other thing that I'm really excited about too is I'm about to launch a show on YouTube. I'm going to be launching it next month. And I'm kind of, I think the world of media and the world of like podcasting and all of that is really kind of for information and education, because they can get that through Claude, whatever, right? But they're hungry for a world in which they can find themselves in. They're hungry for story. They're hungry for like humanness. And so I love parapsychology. And para, again, is this like you're here, but also beyond. It's like along with, but also beyond, right? Paradox, parapsychology. And so for me, this is going to kind of be like a para podcast where there's going to be teaching, there's going to be story, but I'm a musician as well. There'll be some original music. I was an actor for a long time, so maybe I'll get into some of those chops a little bit. And really telling this whole story, throughout the rest of this year leading up to this October book release. And then I'll figure out, what the next story is that I want to tell on the next one. So yeah, it's all fun.
Oh, I can't wait. That's wonderful. Yeah, just be you. Just get weird with it, have fun and just let whatever comes through. That's what is
Exactly.
to be whole. I mean, it doesn't have to be boring. I'm tapping back into my musical abilities. I'm writing a stand-up comedy routine because this year I want to come back and integrate the playfulness, and to be a full integrated human and to do some things that I don't necessarily to be bad at some stuff. I want to be bad at some stuff and have fun, and learn and just, have fun.
Big time. That's what we're here to do. That's what it's all about. Yeah. I think loss of play is kind of one of the pathologies of our time. So I love it.
Totally. Well, this was wonderful. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for reaching out and, scheduling to put this together. And I can't wait to see how you grow and what you do. I mean, you're young and you've got so much medicine inside of you. I am hopeful for humanity just from this conversation.
That's so nice. Thank you so much. Yeah, such respect for you as well, and was excited to go deeper. And I have a feeling that we'll do it again.
Totally.